Hi everyone, this is Tatiana Moroz and welcome to the Tatiana Show. Today's guest is Lyn Ulbricht, mother of Ross Ulbricht of the Silk Road, who is recently sentenced to life in prison in a maximum security prison with no hope of parole and $183 million in fines, which is absolutely insane. Lyn, thank you very much for making the time to join us here today at the Liberty.me studio. Nice to see you.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so why don't we dive right in and fill people in on the latest, because everybody's been wanting to hear from you. I'm sure that it's been very difficult. I know that I've been talking to different activists and people who have been following the case, and everybody has taken this really hard. How are you doing?
Well, yeah, it's a tremendous shock. And really, I was in shock after hearing it. I thought I was prepared for the worst, but it's really pretty hard to prepare for that. And I really didn't expect it. I didn't expect that that judge would give him life for nonviolent offenses. I just didn't expect it, although I thought I was prepared. I was not prepared. So we've been pretty shattered, of kind of recovering and just trying to do whatever I can to take the next step. But it's been tough. It's really hard. I was kind of comparing it to when you have someone die that you care about. That's kind of the feeling I had when I woke up the next day. I just didn't even want to wake up. I wanted to crawl out of my life, just go into somebody else's life or not have to deal with it. And I just couldn't believe it. It was just that kind of mind-numbing, overwhelming shock. It was a very brutal experience to be in there and see that and how the judge acted and how she sentenced him and how she treated him. And it was just a tough thing. The whole thing was.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be there, but from all the reports, it sounds like it was a very emotional courtroom. I was also very surprised at how brutal the punishment was. I think it's absolutely off the wall. I mean, Eric Voorhees had tweeted out that a rapist gets 8 years, and I don't think that Ross did anything nearly as bad. He obviously
It was all nonviolent.
was made
Every
an
conviction
example.
was nonviolent.
Absolutely, and they wanted to make an example, which of course has been ineffectual.
They made that clear. Yeah, exactly. That's what they're doing. They're basically making a very clear statement that they are waging the drug war full out, and they made Ross the example for that, and they said so. They said this will show everyone else what'll happen. I don't think, now I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think that's what a court is supposed to do when they sentence someone. I think justice is blind. I don't think you're supposed to take into consideration that they're a high-profile case. I think high-profile cases should get the same consideration as any other defendant. And the charges, just to be clear what they were, is, let's see, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole for distributing narcotics on the internet, continuing criminal enterprise, which is very questionable if that statute was met as far as actually naming people that the so-called kingpin was managing. But anyway, that was a charge. The conspiracy to aid and abet computer hacking or commit computer hacking, although no, I don't believe anyone's reported a hacking or that Ross was hacking. And then the conspiracy to traffic in fraudulent IDs and money laundering. Life without parole. So those were the charges. There was no violence. There was no when I was growing up you didn't get life sentences unless you were a mass murderer or something. It was a very serious thing, and it just seems since the drug war, there's a lot of people serving life in the prisons. In fact, I read that half the people in there are drug offenders.
I feel like it's almost, I feel like it seems melodramatic to say this, but it's like a whole other slave class. And it's often waged on the poorest people in the country, people that need help. And it's just really takes me, it takes a minute to absorb how heavy and how wrong everything was.
Right. Well, yeah, we can get talking about the whole prison thing, and I've had my eyes opened about that because I've gone to the prison a lot and talked to people visiting their loved ones and looked into it. I'm planning to do a lot more of that. But basically, Ross told me most of the people he knows in there are nonviolent, and I really question the wisdom of caging nonviolent people. And some of them, I just read an article that one of the biggest problems in the prison is that the elderly population of these poor people who've been in there for decades and decades, and now they've got in walkers and wheelchairs. I'm like, could we let them out now? Are they a threat now? And in fact, then they become bedridden, and they have to have medical care, and it's costing a fortune, and these poor people are still in prison. It's wrong. Very, very wrong.
What do you think where is he going to be sent to, and how is that environment of a maximum security prison going to differ from what he's in right now?
Well, we're hoping that he actually will be allowed to stay in New York, because since he has no email privileges, he's been deprived of that. Most prisoners have that. He can't work with his lawyers on the appeal without email or being able to see them. And so we're hoping, and the judge actually did not object to that, and neither did the prosecution, so we're hoping that he'll just stay in New York. I assume that if he didn't stay in New York and he was designated, it would be to a maximum security prison. And I've talked to people who've been in them, and they're very violent and dangerous places. So we're working hard to figure out what's the least bad, and I don't know, trying to mitigate the possibility that Ross could be really hurt or killed. I mean, that's what you're looking at in there. People are killed all the time. And he's not a violent person. He's not someone that, is prepared for that kind of thing. So it's a concern.
Well, it seems like when he was in the New York prison, which is where he is right now, that he's been able to have a very positive impact on the community there within the jail. He was teaching yoga classes. He was tutoring people. He's teaching physics even. So I think that is at least some sort of a comfort, not only to us, but also to him. Because, I mean, it's such a sad story to see there not being any kind of silver lining or some sort of benefit that he could be contributing, because, I mean, I think that's something that really brings a lot of people to this case, is how kind Ross is and how all the good qualities that he has and the ethos behind creating the Silk Road is something that a lot of people can identify with.
Yeah.
Do you think that there will be an opportunity to do anything positive in a new environment, or do you think that it's going to be that bad that it would be impossible?
Oh, I hope there is. I was going to say that I think 3 or 4 of the letters, they're public, that were submitted to the court were from fellow inmates on Ross's behalf, saying how much they thought of him, how much he contributed to them. One of them said that he had helped 3 of them get into college, I guess on a correspondence course. And I think a few of them went to the person in charge of, I guess, the education in the prison and said, we don't know what we're going to do when Ross leaves. I've learned more from him, from he's been here. He's so patient, he's so willing to share his knowledge than I have in the last 10 years. And he attributes to Ross these guys getting into college. And this is just the little time that he's been there. I mean, this portrait that is painted of Ross out on the media is just so skewed and so distorted and plain out wrong. And where you get the real Ross is in these letters. There's over 100 of them. The people have stood by him through this and steadfastly say, this person is one of the best people I know. And now he's making new friends in the prison who are standing up and saying the same thing. I think there is opportunities in these prisons. I think the main thing is staying safe, and I think there's all kinds of extortion and you pay for protection. I mean, these are stories I'm hearing. And, I talked to someone who's witnessed murders and stabbings, and, it's a violent place. So we're hoping that somehow he can avoid that. He doesn't belong in a place like that at all.
He certainly doesn't. I mean, I think that that's really clear. And also, I wonder if that, I mean, I think that Ross's idealism has brought this all on him, and that's really very sad, and it's also a point of connection for a lot of different people. But I think that if he, is in a jail, there's no greater group of people that are ready for a message of freedom and for that kind of philosophy.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
And it really gets to the heart of how we treat people in this country, and that there are so many people actually locked in cages where it's violent and scary and bad, and this is doing nothing to rehabilitate these individuals. It is simply taking advantage of them, looting the taxpayers for extra money, making money for the prison complex, reselling of the labor of the prisoner population. It's very racially targeted. I mean, the good thing with Ross is I think that he can potentially represent a whole different face to this, and it can hopefully help people realize that it's not just some crazy thugs with guns and hanging out. I mean, there's so many different violent elements of the drug war. This was not a violent element. And now that there have been other pop-up copycat sites, do you think that they have a doctor on hand to help people? When people are partying and they're doing drugs, and if somebody overdoses, if they don't have somewhere to go, then there's a good chance that even more harm can come to the person that's using the drugs. This allowed people to do it in a more safe way, and I highly doubt the other competitor sites are even thinking about that. So, I don't know. That's always a point that stands out to me.
Yeah. Well, it seems like from what I've read and learned that, yeah, there was lots of drugs on Silk Road, although, there's mostly marijuana from what I've read, although you wouldn't know that from trial. They barely mentioned marijuana. It's mostly marijuana, and up until, I guess, 2013 or so, when a lot of things happened, like corrupt agents got access to the administration sites, the whole platform had the ability to change passwords, PIN numbers, commandeer accounts, all that. Things really changed then. But anyway, it was peer-to-peer small marijuana deals was the main, from what I understand. I wasn't on it, and other things. But it's also a very strong community, and that comes out in the movie, I think. It was, and also I've read the forum, and there's a lot of community, a lot of philosophy. There's a book club. There's, it was kind of a, I think that the picture that the prosecution painted of it in trial was very limited, and that's not to say I'm defending selling those hard drugs or anything, or advocating drug use. I'm not, but there was more to it. It was, a lot of things were suppressed, and including
I'd like to add,
okay, yeah.
Just on the drugs and marijuana issue, and of course no one is promoting anything, but at the same time we have to be realistic and acknowledge things like this. There was someone who posted in support of Ross his experience and what the Silk Road did for him, and it says, "My younger sister was in a car accident and almost died. She had severe nerve damage in her pelvic region after fracturing her pelvis. It is a rare condition, and after reading how ibogaine has helped others with her condition, she learned there are clinics in Mexico and Canada that offer this drug for treatment, but it is illegal in the U.S. She was able to self-medicate herself thanks to the Silk Road, and it helped her immensely. My mother is a breast cancer survivor. We credit chemotherapy and CBD oils as bringing her to remission. Myself, I don't want to get into specifics, but I was suffering from PTSD, and I was cured via MDMA. Guess where I found it? This all happened over the course of the last 3 years. Thank you, Ross."
Yeah,
so,
what was the guy I met that said he got his insulin on Silk Road because somebody else was selling insulin they weren't using, and he says now he can't afford it. He doesn't know what he's going to do. We
can't close our eyes to the hundreds of stories out there where the Silk Road has actually severely helped people, and people, everyone chooses to only see one side of things, and we can't do that. We have to see the whole
I do
Okay,
think,
so go ahead.
I was going to say, I do believe Ross. I have no doubt that he started it as a free market, open market website with libertarian ideals of being able to be, with limitations of things that harm people. The judge rejected that. She doesn't believe him. I know it's true. I had talked to him about that idea for years before Silk Road.
What are some of the larger implications of the case that people may not be aware of? Sometimes when people try and talk about that, it can sound a little bit confusing.
I'm having a hard time understanding it because there's echo now. Can you say it
Okay.
again?
I didn't do anything different with my recording equipment, so that's frustrating.
Okay, now I can hear you better. Go ahead, say again.
Yeah, but on my side, I have a lot of. Can you tell us a little bit about what are the larger implications of this case?
Yeah, well, a lot of precedent can be set through this case that's very disturbing. One is basically that the standard for evidence has been substantially lowered because now digital evidence, screenshots, chats, is acceptable according to that courtroom as evidence. And it's been thrown out in other cases. I mean, even a mortgage company won't accept a screenshot of a bank statement because they know how easily faked it is. But the prosecution's case was almost completely digital, and it is a very easily faked, manipulated, edited, planted type of evidence, and that opens up the door for the ease of prosecuting people if you can use digital evidence. Another thing is the way the warrant for the laptop was. The question comes up, is a laptop an object, an inert object, so you get a warrant for a laptop? Or is a laptop a portal to lots of different things, like a file cabinet, or a desk, or even a whole house, when you think of what's stored on a laptop? And so do you need a warrant for something you're specifically looking for on a laptop? And if you don't have a particular warrant, then it's called a general warrant, and it's just whatever we can find, rummage through, go on a fishing expedition. This is what we fought the Revolutionary War for. One of the main reasons. This is why they wrote the Fourth Amendment, is against general warrants. And so this is a very important question for the digital age because we keep most of our lives on our phones and laptops. And they had a general warrant for Ross's laptop. Of course, there's also the question of, can the U.S. government hack into a foreign server without a warrant and lie about it under oath? At least I don't know if he was lying because I'm not technically savvy enough. That's just what experts all over the world said. And then the transferred intent, which is saying one person's responsible for what another person does. So, for instance, Federal Express being indicted for people sending illegal pharmaceuticals by Federal Express. They indicted Federal Express for drug trafficking and money laundering. That's transferred intent, blaming Federal Express. And that's, if they blame a website host for what's on the site, that has huge implications. And, this whole thing in the courtroom of overdose deaths, and they're tragic. It's a terrible thing. It's hard to listen to. I felt really horrible for those parents. But the question is, does this foreshadow a precedent where a website host is responsible for the misuse of a product that's bought from someone else who's on their website? And the liability keeps getting bigger and bigger. And it's a big question. And by the way, about that, the government itself had the server during the time that 2 of those overdose deaths occurred, and they kept the server up and Silk Road running and open for business during that time that those things happened. So are they liable? These are questions that, are important.
What is the level of people's concern for that? I mean, I don't really know who would necessarily be writing about that specific aspect, but is there a concern among lawyers? I don't know. Like, are they realizing what has just happened, or is everybody kind of just distracted by it being the Silk Road drug case? I mean, are people seeing the implications of it?
I hope so. One lawyer blogged that the Silk Road was the birth of law for the digital age. And he said, watch it as a spectator at your peril. He was saying, this is we're at a crossroads. We're going into a whole new age, digital age. And I can feel it because I lived in the old age, right? The 20th century. And it's definitely different. Things are changing very quickly. But the law is not quite there. It's being made. It's being set up right now, and it's up to, we don't know, how it's all going to be. But the precedents that are set now for these digital questions will determine the law going forward, and it will determine our freedoms. So it's a very important time right now, and things are somewhat in flux and in transition. And he saw it, this particular lawyer. So I think that this sentencing has shocked a lot of people. It is shocking. It's frightening. A friend of mine wrote and said, this puts us all in peril, this sentencing. This is a frightening thing. And to see the government just use its power like that, so out of proportion, is alarming. And I think from what I'm seeing, I haven't had a lot of time to really read everything. Seems like a lot of people are very concerned.
Well, what is the impact of the movie that has just come out?
I hear it's getting a really good reception. I think that it's opened people's minds to the questions involved here, and to looking at this in different ways. I mean, the mainstream media has had a certain narrative that's been one way, and I think the movie's interesting because it does explore questions. It brings up issues that I think most people don't, and so I think it's having an impact. It's interesting timing that it premiered a couple of days after this sentencing, and I think Alex said it's getting a really great reception.
Has that been translating into donations at all?
Yeah, we've had more donations. I mean, it's constantly, we have so many bills and so much to pay, but it's really heartening to have more donations. It really is. It's like, I was lying awake at night going, how am I going to pay for this appeal? How am I going to do this? And so it was really, really wonderful to get some help. We are definitely getting more donations for now. It's great. I hope it continues.
What is the appeals process looking like?
As far as I know, and I'm meeting, Kirk and I are meeting with the lawyers this next week, so I'll probably know more. You file papers, and it's like a form. We're going to file an appeal, and then I don't know, various paperwork goes back and forth, and I think it takes about a year to be heard by the appellate court. From what I know.
And who's going to be the judge for that? Is it going to be the same judge again?
Well, it's going to be three. No, she's not an appellate judge. There's going to be 3 appellate judges in the tri-state area of New York, Vermont, and Connecticut. They're drawn from that, and I think it's whoever's on the schedule that day. Yeah.
What do you guys need in order to do the appeal, and what are some of the key points that should be brought up? And do you think that they'll be heard, considering?
I don't know everything that Joshua Dratel has in mind for the appeal. Certainly the corruption that was not allowed to be heard at trial, that was blocked from the jury knowing about. And by the way, that corruption, and it definitely goes beyond stealing from the Silk Road, because as I said before, they had administrative access to do all kinds of things on there, including commandeer DPR's account and act as DPR. They had the ability to do that. There's a great deal of information and evidence that is sealed still, and a lot of it's encrypted, and so there's a vast amount that we don't even know the extent of his corruption and how much the evidence is tainted. This was not allowed to be presented at trial, so that will definitely be part of appeal. And it relies on the Brady rule, which is basically says that you cannot suppress evidence that's favorable to a defendant that's exculpatory. And so that's one issue. I don't know all the issues that will be raised.
Will it be the same legal team?
Yes.
Have you thought about which groups outside of the Bitcoin community that you could be reaching out to now that the worst part is over, so to speak? I don't know what's the worst part, but
yeah, really. You always think you've had the worst part, and then it gets worse. I really feel like this is a drug war case. It's brought a lot of attention to, and the prosecution and judge obviously do too. And I feel like anyone who is concerned or against the drug war should take an interest in this case and help us appeal it, because if it's pushed back, it'll be a huge victory. It's an opportunity, really, to really do something to push back against this drug war, which is so destructive that has not stopped anyone from using drugs. So it's been a big failure that way, but it's a huge success if you're after money, power, and expansion of government, and stuffing our prisons beyond their capacity with nonviolent people. It's a huge success, and it's wrong. It's very wrong, and so this is an opportunity to push back, and the court the other day made it very clear this is a political case, and in a sense you can say Ross is a political prisoner. They were very political. She even brought up his political beliefs at the sentencing, which were, she brought up things that were on the site that were, against the U.S. government, saying, the U.S. government, negative things about the U.S. government, and lots of people do that. And she said, well, that's really dangerous, and that really troubles me. And so his political beliefs were part of this sentencing.
do you think that people are understanding the gravity? Like, how are people accepting this case other than people that are from within the community? Do you think other people see it in a sympathetic light? Do they see that this was a gross misjustice? I mean, some of the comments on different kinds of posts around the internet have definitely been negative, but most of them I think are pretty human. So I wonder if they're kind of trolls. I feel like it's very disturbing what has gone on here, because it really shows that the government is not messing around. The way that it treated Bradley Manning, the way that it treated Edward Snowden, the way that it treated Julian Assange and Aaron Schwartz, and now Ross Ulbricht.
And Barrett Brown too. Don't forget him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. I'm sorry. What was the question? You said something. And
well,
I just
do you think that people are connecting? Yeah. Are they getting this? Aside from the Liberty people who are obviously going to get it, so to speak. Do you think that the average person does?
Right. Well, the thing is, it's hard because the way the media portrays it, how can they? A lot of people think Ross has been convicted for murder. He wasn't even charged with it.
Could we talk about that?
Sure.
Let's clarify what happened with the murder charges, because if you could maybe outline the key points, including, of course, that he, what has he been charged with, what hasn't he, what has been, just all the details of that, so people really understand it, not just from the prosecution side.
Well, what he's been charged with, I said before, right? The list was narcotics trafficking, criminal enterprise, computer hacking, fraudulent IDs, and money laundering. That's what he's been charged and convicted for. That's it. Not any violence, not murder for hire. It's uncharged, and of course, because it's uncharged, it's not convicted. They claim it's true. Why didn't they charge him for it then? You know?
Aren't they charging him in Maryland, though?
They have indicted him. An indictment's very different from being convicted. An indictment can be based on hearsay. Indictment requires no proof. Now, that's been sitting there for over a year and a half, sitting there. I don't know if these things have an expiration date, but I guess you can just indict somebody on hearsay or whatever. And of course, Maryland is where the whole corruption was. And let it sit there. I don't know. I'm surprised it hasn't expired. But as part of the New York trial, no. And our lawyer said if it had any merit, they would have incorporated the Maryland charges. Anyway, I don't know. But they didn't charge him for it in New York. And they used it to deprive him of bail. Said he was dangerous. If you knew Ross, that's the biggest joke. Not dangerous person. He's so peaceful and so laid back. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And but he didn't get bail because of that. First time offender, nonviolent, all that. And then they dropped it. I have no explanation of why. But then they were allowed to talk about it at the trial. Well, I don't think the jury really understood that it wasn't a charge. I mean, they said it. They definitely told them it wasn't. But it definitely poisoned the whole thing. But that was part of the prosecution had a very carefully crafted narrative and fought tooth and nail for anything else to be presented to the jury. And they had a very specific picture they wanted to paint, and that's what got painted. And the judge allowed that.
What were some of the things that you guys weren't able to bring up? And where are actually, well, all right, I'd also like to know what's happening with those two corrupt officers or DHS officials, I don't know what you would call them, that
one's a DEA
had
agent
access
and one
to the
is a
servers.
Secret Service agent.
Okay.
I guess they were waiting trial. They were arrested. So that's that. What we weren't allowed to bring up, well, Ross's political beliefs were banished. No one was allowed to mention his political beliefs. He was not allowed to be seen having a family. So we were sitting behind him, very close to him, and, you know, when they'd have a sidebar or whatever, he'd turn around, smile, and make eye contact. Well, the prosecution got wind of it and said, no, he's not allowed to acknowledge his family while the jury's in the room. Because I didn't fit the picture. Let's see, what else got erased? Well, you know, actually, Agent Tarbell got erased, who was the lead investigator. He didn't show up. It was barely mentioned. I don't think the jury knew he existed. Meanwhile, he's the one that supposedly found the server, head of the investigation, head of the arrest team, signed the criminal complaint, nowhere to be found. I think probably because they didn't want him cross-examined about the server. And let's see, what else? Of course, couple of witnesses were blocked. It was, well, the whole Silk Road, like we were talking about before, you would think the only thing on there was hard drugs and cyanide, basically. That marijuana was wasn't even mentioned. I think maybe once, barely. You know, it was not that I'm defending it, but it wasn't presented accurately. You know, there was many things. So it was, and those things were. Oh, another thing was the idea that there were multiple DPRs. And in fact, one of the high-level administrators, known as Inigo, was going to be on the witness stand. They took him off, but there was a little phrase that he had said that Draytell wanted to tell the jury, and that was that at one point Inigo had said he and DPR had a special prompt to recognize each other because lots of people used all these handles. And when he went on there, DPR didn't remember the prompt. That DPR didn't. The other DPR that he'd made the prompt with, the second DPR or whatever, didn't recognize it. And the prosecution would not fought to not have that presented to the jury. So information was suppressed throughout.
So what's going to happen to these two corrupt officials? Are they going to get in trouble? What is the extent of it? What are they?
I don't know.
Where are they at with their prosecution?
I'm not following it. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know what's
and why wasn't that available to be brought up during the case? Because they were in Maryland. That was the claim.
No, the claim was that it would jeopardize the investigation if it came up in trial and tip off the agents. Then we found out, and our team said, well, okay, well, let's postpone the trial till you wrap up your investigation. They said, oh, no, Ross needs to have a speedy trial. He has a right. And I'm like, how about the right to a fair trial? But anyway, then it turned out the agents already knew they were being investigated. They'd been even interviewed. So that was not true. They'd be tipped off. So the only reason I can think of that they didn't have it in trial was to keep the jury from hearing about it, call into question the evidence. So it was blocked. I remember getting the call, being told some really important stuff's being blocked and there's nothing we can do about it. We weren't allowed to mention it. That's not right. That is the Brady rule. You do not exclude evidence that might be favorable to the defendant.
So it seems like you guys would have a very good appeal case.
I hope so.
Do you think that the community's response to it and people's putting pressure and maybe becoming more aware of the failure of the drug war, do you think that would be something that would be able to help change the opinion of the court? Because this time it seemed purposely ignoring facts, purposely ignoring any concept of justice. It's a message, right? So if there was an appeal, that would be my concern, is that the message would still be, shut up, do what we say, we're the boss. And that's it.
Okay, there's a few things in there, but first of all, I want to say that, because of the precedents in this case, and because of the way the trial was handled and the way the sentencing went, even if people don't like Ross, think he's a villain, think he's guilty, all of this, they should be concerned about how the government handled this whole thing. And my question is, if you have such a good case, why are you doing all this stuff? But anyway, so my point is that it's bigger than Ross as an individual or even Silk Road. This is serious, how they've acted, and how they've prosecuted him and sentenced him. This sentencing is over the top. And so there's that. I don't know if appellate judges are influenced by that kind of thing or not. Certainly, I think it's important to do. I think that the court of public opinion does matter. And it certainly matters for support for us and fundraising and education. And I do think it's important. Now, the job of an appellate court is not to try the facts of the case or whether the person's guilty or innocent. It's to see if the law was properly administered. They're there to defend the law. And they say, if 10 guilty people walk free, it's better than having the law damaged. And so that's their job, and one hopes they'll do it.
Well, I think that there were definitely very clear examples of the law not being followed to the letter, even from the government's perspective in terms of their investigation, etc. What is it costing you monthly to fight this battle?
I haven't been paying monthly because I haven't had it. This month I need to come up with $20,000. And then, what I think I'm going to do is get it all sorted out, and hopefully I can put it out there publicly. This is what we paid, this is what we have to pay. So I've just been paying as I can, and lawyers have been really very patient about it. We owe them a lot of money from the trial. Trials are really, really expensive, like $35,000 a week. So I don't have an exact figure in my head, but I know that this month of June, we will be paying them $20,000 one way or the other. Plus, there was the pathologist at the sentencing that we had to hire for $9,000 to defend against. He came up with and said there's no scientific evidence or way you can determine the deaths of these overdose people. And he went through the autopsy reports and all of this stuff, and it had huge gaps. And the judge just said, well, that's not really important. It's irrelevant. how they died and what caused their death. I'm like, well, don't we want evidence in a, we're in a courtroom. But
Well,
so it's expensive. Just to consult an expert is expensive.
well, to talk about the people that it was accused the Silk Road was responsible for killing through their drug use, I believe that 2 of the people that died supposedly during the Silk Road, it was during the part that it was taken over by the U.S. government.
Right.
So
Yeah.
wouldn't they be equally liable for
Right.
the
Well,
deaths of people?
that's what I was saying earlier. Yeah. Well, by their logic, yeah. But then it's kind of like saying any website host is responsible for the misuse. Now, this is illegal stuff, and you can make that whole argument, but the principle there and the potential precedent there is saying that can be used, is saying that, if somebody buys something on a website and misuses it and is hurt by it, that the vendor, we skip the vendor, we're going right to the website host. And, every website, or a lot of websites, have illegitimate, slightly legitimate stuff on them. So it opens it's a crack in the door.
And these things would come up in the appeal, correct?
I'm not sure exactly what's going to be appealed. I mean, as far as, I don't know. When you say these things, I'm not sure what you're referring to.
I'm just checking in the chat to gain some of the questions.
Oh.
I was thinking maybe we could bring Julia Taransky in.
Yeah.
Julia was there for a lot of the trials. She was doing some amazing reports. She's a very good friend and supporter. Julia, thanks for joining us today.
Hey.
What are your thoughts on everything so far?
I wanted to go back to the intentions of Ross that we briefly mentioned. And I just want to point out that it's kind of ridiculous to me that that was even considered because, look at history, look at what good intentions have gotten us, look at what good intentions of the government in this case have gotten us, if they were indeed good intentions, but that is the narrative. So they're well-intentioned and they shut down this drug market. What did it result in? It resulted in hundreds of new dark markets, okay, that sell things like stolen credit cards, child porn, identity theft, information, which totally destroys lives. They don't have a moral. They don't have a moral code. They don't have a philosophical backbone. They don't have doctors, like Tatiana mentioned, guiding people into rehabilitation or safe drug usage. So, I mean, good intentions don't really matter to me, and I don't see why they should even come up in court, because they're very difficult to prove or disprove. So even if Ross was a sociopath, and even if he was poorly intentioned, it doesn't matter because what resulted was positive.
That's really it. Well, the old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Exactly.
It's true. It doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Now, there was the question here about what do you mean Ross wasn't allowed to mention his political beliefs? Couldn't he just blurt it out that he even, get bail? No, he wasn't allowed to have bail, right? And he wasn't allowed, his defense or him were not allowed to mention his moral character or philosophical beliefs because that wasn't relevant, even though them saying the opposite, assuming what his beliefs were, was relevant and admissible. So that makes no sense. But no, he can't just blurt it out because they would, silence him and overrule him. Like, you can't do those kinds of things in court. It just makes you look bad.
They would probably escort you out of the courtroom and into a cell very quickly.
Yes.
With marshals sitting there right next to him if he does anything. He's out of there.
Can you explain one thing that just popped into my mind? Why was Ross in solitary for over 6 months? That seems insanely
6 weeks.
overzealous.
Not months.
Oh, 6.
Oh my God.
Somebody had told me 6 months, and I was like, how is that possible? Why would he even be in there for 6 weeks? He doesn't seem like a crazy wild guy or anything.
Hardly. I never got an explanation. It was one of our arguments in the bail hearing because he was prevented from seeing his lawyer because he was in what's called the SHU, the Special Housing Unit, which is real special. It's hideously horrible. And right before the bail hearing, like the day before, whoops, he's out of the SHU. So that argument was gone. So they obviously had control over him being in there, and I never found out why. But I was glad to have him out of there.
What are some of the talks that you're doing that are up and coming, Lyn? And what are you going on tour with the movie anymore? I know that they're showing it at different festivals, and the Q&A has been very good, and I think a really great way for the audience to, you know, delve a little bit deeper. What are your plans for the upcoming months?
The only thing I have planned is going up to the Porcupine Freedom Festival in New Hampshire. And actually, I'm going to screen the Deep Web movie there, and Julie and I are going to do a Q&A. And then I'm also going to do a talk on, basically I'm going to go down all the things the government did from start to finish quickly. There's so many of them, you have to be fast with it. And just give an overview of how the government has acted in this case. And, you know, talk about some other things, but... So I'm going to be up there at PorcFest. That's the only thing I really have scheduled to do publicly, you know, besides interviews like this. Do some of those.
Julia, were you working on a project that you wanted to talk about? Because we've all been trying to figure out different ways that we can help out. Obviously, people can go to freeross.org. By the way, for our Let's Talk Bitcoin listeners, the secret word is freeross.org. So it's that URL address. Freeross.org is the secret word for people listening on LTB. Julia, what's the project that you are working on?
I'm just putting together a care package for Ross of screenshots of all the nice articles and comments and tweets and retweets and memes that people have been making of in support of him. So if anybody wants to contribute, I'm finishing that up tonight. So if you want to tweet me a screenshot or just tweet me a supportive comment, then I'll screenshot myself at Brave the World. So that would be great. I'm actually trying to decide whether to include this. I don't know if anybody saw it. I'm going to screen share. Let's do that.
Julia, just so you know, send it in an envelope, or you can do a large envelope, but if you send a box or anything...
No, it'll be an envelope.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so here, can you guys see this? This is on top of Bitcoin Reddit today. Okay, so it says Obama had written in his first book, Dreams from My Father, that he had used marijuana and cocaine, maybe a little blow. He said he had not tried heroin because he did not like the pusher who was trying to sell it to him. Then there's an image of the violent drug war, and then there's an image of a happy postman delivering some heroin to Obama. And then the next thing is, fix that for ya. So maybe we should appeal to Obama to just pardon Ross because, you know, he solved his issue of getting drugs. I just kind of like that.
There is a petition.
Hypocrisy, right?
Yeah, there is a petition just went up for Obama to pardon Ross.
Yeah, I did see that.
And I think it's getting a lot of signatures. So you know, even if Obama didn't pardon Ross, it would be a good statement to have a lot of people on that petition. So it's on our I posted on our Facebook. I need to put it on the website.
Someone asked me if there would be a president that would potentially pardon Ross, but my opinion is that each of these presidents are exactly like the one before in terms of their overall statism, their violence-loving. Just I don't know. It's pretty bad right now, and I don't think that a president is going to be able to save our country or uphold at least the Constitution. You know, forget about anarchy. It's a little wild out there. Let's just assume that. But I mean, we're not even sticking with what this country was founded on, those principles, very basic ones. So I don't know if that appeal will work, but I do think that getting the signatures is good. Although it may get us put on a list.
It's a statement, you know?
Exactly. Julia, any final thoughts on how you think that we can be helping support the Ross project, I guess, now that it's going to be a little bit more for the long haul?
Yeah, we need the fire to keep burning. We need people to keep talking about it. Lyn needs donations so she can actually go forward with the appeal and continue with it throughout, because it takes like a whole year to do it. And people write to Ross. I mean, and I would suggest don't focus on, oh, I'm so sorry you're in jail, it sucks. Just make friends with him, write to him. Like, he needs a channel to the outside world. Like, he doesn't get to have the internet, so that's why I thought this care package would be really great, because he's kind of got like the horse blinders on. He doesn't know who thinks what, and just think about how much time we spend on Facebook and Twitter reassuring ourselves of our own existence and of our own voices. He's in a cell, and he's alone, and he feels alone because he's totally severed from something that has been an integral part of him growing up, which is the internet.
I want to say that is so thoughtful of you, Julia, to what you're doing, and it's so true. And I've been sending him little snippets here and there, but it's hard for me to keep up with it, and send him any email that comes, I'll print it out, and positive things. But that's great that you're doing that, and it's true. That would be so neat for him to get an ongoing communication like that. And he also really likes reprints of articles, he told me.
Yeah, so I've included some of the best ones that I've seen. A lot of Jeffrey Tucker's
really
ones.
Thoughtful. Yeah, Jeffrey would be great. No, that's so thoughtful of you, really. Thank you.
That makes me happy to do it.
Yeah, so sweet.
So his address is listed on freeross.org, and
if you want to contact us, it's for now.
That's going to be changed, correct?
Well, we don't know. Actually, some of the inmates went to the guy who's the head of the education there and said, we don't know what we're going to do when Ross leaves. Oh, I already told you that. Did I already say? I can't remember what I've said now. But
you didn't say it quite like that.
And they said, we've learned so much, and we don't know what we're going to do when he leaves. And so, who knows? Maybe that guy will put in a request to have him stay.
Yeah, maybe. Is there any action they can take from within the jail to
Possibly.
Keep him there? That sounds
not like it's the greatest place in the world, but he wants to stay. He'll probably either go there. If he can stay in New York, he'll either be there or in Brooklyn. But it is a totally different. Then it's a whole new address and policies and everything.
Do they read his mail?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and
watch it, people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you do.
Oh, there's another question which we get this question a lot, and it's just kind of a ridiculous one to me. And it says, why do people defend him? Because they believe that because of his philosophy, or because they think he's innocent. So, and a lot of people they accuse of the Ross supporters as being hypocritical and changing their tune. But I just want to really point out that no one has changed their tune, because Ross is innocent whether he was DPR the whole time, some of the time, or none of the time. If he was DPR the whole time, it's just common sense that the Silk Road was a force for good, so he's not guilty of anything. If he was in DPR, he's not guilty. It all leads to the same end.
One other point, Lyn, what about Ross's computer programming background? How could he actually build the Silk Road if he was the only owner of it? Because it doesn't seem like, I have no experience with that stuff. I wouldn't know how to build a Silk Road. Was he computer savvy?
Well, not really. He wasn't one of these kids that grew up with on the computer all the time, or even video games. I was kind of mom was like, turn off the TV or whatever, we go outside and play. He didn't have video games or Nintendo or any of that. And in fact, he and his cousin took a big long piece of paper and drew their video game. Here's my guy, and he's going to shoot this, and it was this huge art piece, because they didn't have an actual machine. They drew it. So I didn't provide him with electronics, and so he really, he knew some stuff. More than I do. But
even if he taught himself, he would still need help putting it to practice and orchestrating.
Yeah, right.
It's a huge endeavor. People don't really go build a website on WordPress. That'll take you hours, even from scratch. That's easy. That's the easy part, right?
Right. That's what I'm saying, is that he didn't have that childhood orientation of computers, and then he didn't major in or study or take courses in computer science either. So I've wondered that myself. I'm like, how could he possibly been the only one? It just seems like he didn't have the skills, but you know.
Okay. So we're going to look forward toward the appeal. We're going to ask anybody in the audience that has any suggestions for different larger activist groups that Lyn could potentially fit with. That would be great, because then we could do some outreach and build up awareness for their causes as well as Ross's case. I would highly encourage everybody to please donate to freeross.org. You go to that website, there's a QR code, you could donate Bitcoin. I was speaking with Chris from ProTip, and he was saying that once his thing launches, I think within the next month or two tops, you can set it up to automatically donate. Lyn, do you have any kind of automatic monthly donation so people can just say, okay, every month I want to give $20 or something like that? Is there something set up like that on the website?
There's people have set it up on PayPal themselves. That's interesting. I'll have to find out about that. Setting it up on the website, yeah, so people can do that.
Well, ProTip will be able to help with that. Julia, I know that you're doing a lot of stuff to help raise awareness. Where can people check out all of your information and maybe get, if they wanted to get some of the videos from the actual court case? Julia was there, so she was recording basically right after she left the courtroom. And if people want a little more background.
If you want a lot of the detail of what happened during the trial, I have 3 videos, and it's on my YouTube channel, Brave the World channel on YouTube. You can just search Brave the World in YouTube and it should come up. Or you can access the channel through my website, bravetheworld.com. Or if you forget that, at Brave the World on my Twitter, and you can get links from anywhere.
Okay, great. Well, please check out the Deep Web movie. I think you can get it on Epix HD. You can get a free trial. You can watch it there. Please tell everybody about this case. Whenever you think about Ross, send out a tweet about him, because we need to make sure that people are constantly thinking about this. We're driving home what has happened here and what we can do as a community to help him. Please donate. Please spread the word.
Let me say something else.
Sure, absolutely.
I just want to say, yeah, that's so true, because one of my fears is that, you know, people just forget about Ross and he'll just be rotting. I mean, I'm not going to, but, you know, I hate to think that he would just be forgotten. And so it's true. It'd be nice not to forget him. It's easy to do when someone's off, you know, stuffed away in prison. And the other thing I was going to say is, besides money, which we always need, is, you know, if you have ideas or networking or, you know, any kind of supportive thing, or want to offer time or volunteer, just contact us through the website, and you'll probably get me. I'll probably answer your emails, because it's basically me. So I'll can use all the help I can get.
Yeah, folks, if you want to donate some time, of course in a consistent way, because, you know, teaching somebody how to handle that stuff, I'm sure Lyn could appreciate it, and at the very least do some retweets, do some social media stuff, and let's stay connected. Awesome. All right, thank you very much to everybody for being here today. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Lyn. We'll do a follow-up maybe in a month or so when I come back to New York, so we can keep this idea fresh in everybody's mind. Check out the Deep Web movie. Thanks to the LTB audience. Thank you very much to Liberty.me for hosting us. If you like this video, please share it. We'll be back Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern next week. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Tatiana.
Bye.